Thank you. During his last couple of months among us, I was privileged to share a number of conversations with Father Arnie about all manner of things. Tonight, I'd like to start by relaying one anecdote that stood out as especially evocative of his mission on this planet, and that tells us something about why this room overflows tonight to honor his memory. So one afternoon, after he'd been sent home to hospice care, I asked Father Arnie for the story of why he became a priest. In retrospect, he said, it began his sophomore year at Harvard. Father Arnie, who was not father then, only Arnie, was manager of the crew team that year. He befriended one particular rower with whom he liked to talk about English literature. This friend ended up dropping out of Harvard and joining the military, and the last time Father Arnie saw him, he was in uniform. This friend was soon killed in Vietnam. Father Arnie said to me, and I quote, "It bothered me that I hadn't talked to him more deeply about faith. I wondered whether I could have made a difference to where he ended up after death. That was my first conscious thought of spiritual fatherhood." Well, tonight, this room is full of people to whom Father Arnie did talk deeply about the faith, both literally and figuratively. For some of you, he was a spiritual director of the very first order. Others knew him as a most fatherly of confessors. And still others would have met him, as I first did, through the CIC's intellectual circuits. He had the most small c Catholic mind imaginable. As many of you know, our friend was an invigorating, sometimes mischievous conversationalist. His aesthetic tastes were broad. He had a lifelong devotion to the Romantic poets, especially Keats. As for Shakespeare, his favorites were Hamlet, King Lear, Henry IV, and the sonnets. In music, he favored Bach, Beethoven, Mozart. In architecture, the Romanesque. He was also an athlete and a Renaissance man who, amusingly enough, found most Renaissance painting over-the-top ostentatious. And the reason I know this is that a few weeks before he died, I went and dropped by, and he was thumbing through a box full of images. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "You might think this is macabre, but I'm picking out the picture that they're going to use at my funeral. And all they gave me were these Renaissance paintings." He said, "I can't find anything simple enough." Well, all of this cultivation of his and lots else he wore lightly. Above all, his adroitness with philosophy and theology was reflected not only in conversation, but brought to life in the CIC's lecture series and in the Leonine Forum speaking program, both of which remain among the most consistently interesting intellectual venues in this city or any other. Then there were the ways that he spoke to us figuratively, both through the power of his example and the institutionalization of good and serious ideas, especially at the CIC and the Leonine Forum. Most vital of all was his esprit de corps. At a time when many traditionalists are filled with dread for the present and the future, the CIC and Father Arnie radiated not only happiness, but hope. Father Arnie made sure the CIC was in it for the win. He understood elementally that Catholicism has become the new counterculture. He made us all see that the CIC and the Leonine Forum are now indispensable because, as he put it to me in another conversation right before he died, quote, "The lack of transcendence in secularism is its greatest weakness, alongside its carnality and its hubris of God as man. it fails to satisfy what's deepest in us, unquote. The CIC exists to exploit that weakness that he saw and to offer everyone, especially his beloved young professionals, a more ennobled, elevated, charitable purpose in life. In sum, Father Arnie was a virtuoso trickster who would use anything he could, a book, an idea, a party, a matchmaking attempt, as an instrument that might bring people to the truth. That was the legacy we are all now charged to continue. By working with Father Charles and Mitch and team to continue the vital efforts of the CIC and Leonine Forum for new generations. In a town where many games are played, Father Arnie never stopped playing the longest game of all. He never stopped learning the lesson of his friend at Harvard. He never stopped working to affect where every single one of us in this room and many other people will end up. Nothing would have pleased him more to think that everybody here has now made the same mission their own. Now, please join me in watching a short video about his legacy. Thank you.